Atypical Talk. This is a podcast where we have conversations that illuminate the intersection of faith, culture, and the common spaces of our humanity. I'm Abby.
I'm Allison.
And I'm Joel.
And today our conversation is going to be about the Supreme Court overturning Roe V. Wade. This is a very hot topic right now, and we wanted to talk about this and a little bit about our role as Christians in this.
Yeah, not a hot topic at all.
No.
Not something that everybody agrees
Super
upon.
light,
Just
super light conversation
stuff. But we did feel like it was important. There's a lot of people talking at people about this issue, but I don't feel like there's a great cultural conversation going on with curiosity and empathy and trying to understand the other side. And so I thought it would be an important time for us to get together and have that conversation because, hey, we have a few microphones and a podcast and a few people that listen, so let's have that conversation I wish people were having. And today I'm really excited because my friend, Dr. Andrea Hoover, is here with us. I met Andrea a little over a year ago. We're in a Bible study together, and she is an incredible, incredible person. And through her work and her vocation, I think she has a invaluable perspective and experience with this topic. And she is a serious follower of Jesus and always blows me away by her research and how she'll go down the rabbit hole to find the best information. And I just admire that and admire her and inspired by her as a woman, as a leader, as a mother, and as a follower of Jesus. So Andrea, thanks so much for joining us on the Atypical Talk podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Joel.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
How would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so like Joel said, I'm an OBGYN. I had to think about this today. I have been doing this for 19 years.
Wow.
My first several years, I worked in just a general practice of OBGYN, taking care of women in the office and delivering babies and doing surgery. The last 4 years, I've been at a bigger hospital that's mainly, a lot of what I do is doing high-risk obstetrics as far as taking care of sick moms in the hospital, delivering those early babies, and then doing some general OB care as well, but now I'm strictly in the hospital.
So just to cut in for a second,
Yeah.
do you have an estimation of how many babies
I was
you
literally
have
wanting to ask
assisted
that.
bringing into the world?
I know, people have asked me that. I so wish that I would have kept track of that. So
It's a small town in Oklahoma.
I mean, it's definitely in the
Population.
thousands. Like I know
it's
before
amazing.
I finished residency, I think I had somewhere around 1,000 deliveries, and then in private practice, somewhere around 200 a year. So you put all those years together. I mean, there's a lot of babies.
It's a lot of time in the room. It's a lot of time in the room where it happens.
Yes.
It really
Yes,
is. That's
that's for
incredible.
sure.
That's incredible. Yeah. So thanks so much for being here. I'm so excited to hear your voice in this conversation. And just as we intro the topic of talking about the Supreme Court's reversal of Roe v. Wade, we felt it was so necessary to talk about this and be open and hearing and listening to each other in it. And I'm asking from everybody listening for a grace umbrella because this topic of abortion, of a woman's right to choose, and the life of the unborn and women's health, it is an emotionally charged issue, and it's an important issue. So I understand why there's a lot of emotion behind it. I have a lot of emotion behind this issue as well. So something that I just want to sort of guide our conversation in is understanding that we all require a lot of grace and empathy as we talk about this, and for us to know that faithful Christians throughout the last 100 years and even beyond, in faithful Christians that are sitting in our churches across the world today, there's disagreement about abortion rights, and there's disagreement about limits on abortion. There's disagreement about all these things, and you can be a faithful Christian, be in the club, is using a terrible euphemism, and have disagreements. And I think one of the beautiful things that we can model to the world is how to hold unity but not uniformity. And that's one of these issues where I think we have an opportunity to do so. So understand that we're not coming from any place of ultimate authority. There's no Bible verse in all of the scripture, Old Testament, New Testament, that talks directly about this issue and in our time. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. There's some principles that we help try to guide us, but we're just doing the best we can in the time that God has us here to process and to walk faithfully in the world and to partner with God to bring his kingdom here, to bring the up here or up there, down here in our everyday life. So that's why we're talking about it. Please give us a grace umbrella as we talk about it. I think a lot of times in these conversations, there's some unhelpful binaries that we try to use. And a lot of times they're pushed on us by our partisan politics, where there's one side of the aisle that likes to say, well, we're pro-life, and the other side of the aisle that will say that we are pro-choice. And I think those are unhelpful binaries. I think we all come to different places and we can define ourselves in different ways. But man, these can be divisive terms. And the reality is that everybody is pro-life to a certain degree, and everybody is pro-choice to a certain degree. And if we find ourselves pigeonholed in these places, it just divides us more, and it doesn't speak truthfully to where we are. And honestly, one of my fears is that people of faith get co-opted by partisan politics in their search for power and control, and then we lose the plot in the process. So you're not going to hear us declare we're pro-life or we're pro-choice today. That's not the conversation that we're interested in having. I'll tell you what the conversation we are interested in having is that we want to be people that value people and care about people, all kinds of people. We value the life of unborn babies, of children, and of women. From God's heart and God's plan, from the womb to the tomb. We value everybody in this conversation. And inside of that, we're guided by the way of Jesus and the example of Jesus. And through the 4 Gospels that you have in the beginning of your New Testament, you are having this interaction with this Jewish rabbi who was radical in the way he talked about children, and he was radical in the way he talked about women. In the first century, it was very common to throw babies out for them to be left to just die from, it was called infanticide, just die from exposure, to leave them out by the local trash heap. And Jesus spoke into that reality, and he said, let the little children come to me. He says, if you get in the way of children, I'm going to tie a millstone. It'd be better that you tie a millstone around your neck and throw you to the bottom of the sea. Let the little children come to me. The kingdom, they get this. Kids, little ones that you think are insignificant, get it more than the adults in the room. And when it came to women, Jesus' ministry was basically bankrolled by women. He invited women to sit as his disciples, as equal learners. And then when he died, resurrected, then ascended to the right hand of God the Father, was women who were leading the way, reading the letters of the apostles to the early churches. Jesus met the culture where it was, and he elevated both kids, babies, women, all along the way. So that's the conversation that we're interested in having, is how do we approach the tragic decision, the tragic systems that create abortion to become this impossible choice that women face, and how do we meet people where they are in this complicated issue, and also examine the circumstances that lead to what I find to be just an impossible choice that many women face. So we're not telling you how to vote. We're not telling you that you're an idiot, you're wrong, or that you're reading the Bible wrong. That's not what we're doing here. We just want to have a spirit of curiosity and empathy. And for me, as today on the panel, the only man in the room, my goal for the rest of the time that we have together is to shut up and listen and humble myself to learn so that I can care for people better, because that is what my rabbi, my Lord Jesus, is beckoning me to do. So take it away, ladies.
So I know going through social media, it can be hard to actually understand what's going on, because all you see is people arguing and getting at each other's throats. So what actually happened with the Supreme Court decision?
Yeah, and I think that's an important first question because it is so misunderstood. And, really, when you look at when Roe versus Wade in 1973 is when that Supreme Court decision was made, and that decision was given where women were given the right to choose to have an abortion, that the Constitution would guarantee that choice, and that was permitted through viability with some permissions, regulations after the first trimester. So when Roe v. Wade happened in 1973, that was giving the constitutional guarantee for the right to abortion. Now, when Roe v. Wade was overturned here recently, that was all based on a ruling of what was Dobbs versus Jackson in the Supreme Court. And so in March of 2018 is when this was brought. And again, just to interject, I want to tell you that I'm doing the best to give my topic justice. Like, I can speak as an OBGYN. I can speak to the best of my ability about what's going on right now. These laws that we're seeing every day, things are changing, and I definitely don't have the legal expertise to back it up. So I'm doing my best to do this topic justice, and, as from my perspective as an OBGYN. So I just wanted to interject that in there as well. But so in March of 2018, Mississippi's only abortion clinic sued Thomas Dobbs, which was a state health officer, regarding the ban of abortion after 15 weeks. So because they felt like that was a violation of some of these Roe versus Wade laws. And the Supreme Court, so this went to the Supreme Court of should this be banned after 15 weeks or not. And then the Supreme Court decision was when they looked at these opinions, they essentially just decided to give it back to the states. So instead of giving this constitutional guarantee on abortion, they have given the states that decision to decide. So the most important thing to understand out of this is this did not make abortion illegal in the United States. It turned the power back over to the states. And with that, we're going to see some decisions come pretty quickly, and some already have, on what each individual state's going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of having one uniform understanding of the right to access to an abortion, it is now the possibility of 50 different options and different limitations and different freedoms across the country. So it wasn't like in one fatal swoop, like everything changed for everyone.
Right.
And as we sit today, in Indiana, this is July 13th, and actually nothing's changed in Indiana.
Right.
They have not made any decisions yet. Now, it's likely that something will change, but it is fascinating the fear, which is completely valid from people that feel like they're losing a right, but also understanding that nothing has actually changed yet.
And then I think just adding on to that too, when we talk about abortion, I just think just describing that term a little bit too, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about that term. So medically, we use the term abortion for a lot of different things. So when a miscarriage is considered a spontaneous abortion, and so we use to say that's an abortion is a type of abortion, as a spontaneous abortion. So I realize the word abortion has a very can ignite a lot of emotion. But in the medical world, there's a few different type of abortions other than what we're talking about here with Roe v. Wade for the most part. So, spontaneous abortions or miscarriages, and sometimes you have an incomplete abortion where someone goes through a partial miscarriage, but their body couldn't finish it on its own, and they maybe sometimes have to have a procedure or some medicine to help. So I think just dispelling abortion doesn't necessarily equal elective abortion. So, really what the laws are getting here is, for the most part, the intent is to get to reduce the amount of elective abortions, meaning, the whole point of the abortion is to end the life of that fetus for one reason or another.
Okay. Well, you talk about the misconceptions around the term abortion, but what are some other misconceptions or things that aren't as black and white that you've noticed in your expertise?
Yeah. Gosh, there's lots of them. And I think that's why this topic's so important. And just, I think, again, just remembering, like Joel said, this is a very heated topic because usually people on both sides really are, they're speaking out and they're concerned because they care. They have a desire for justice, whether it be if they're looking at the perspective of the woman or of the unborn baby. They're wanting to make sure people are taken care of. And I think, to remember that we're all more alike than we're different, and that regardless of where anyone stands on this topic. I think just trying to remember the humanity that they do want. People just want to make sure people are taken care of, women and children or both. So I think, just starting with that is important to remember when we talk about these things.
That might have been worth your pushing play on this podcast. I mean, just to stop and think that, both sides are after justice, which, by the way, justice is a beautiful, and in my perspective as a Christian, like, that is a God-given desire for you to see things made right. And so we can see things differently, but understanding that both sides are trying to live out of this, this God-given itch, to see things made right. I mean, that helps bring the temperature down in the conversation, right?
Yeah, I think so for sure. So, I think probably one of the biggest misconceptions I see right now all over social media is that the overturning of Roe will prohibit the treatment of ectopic or miscarriages. So, I think, and I know we'll hopefully get into this a little bit, I think there is some concern as we're making new legislation that some of the perception of the interpretation of these laws can have reason for concern. But certainly, I think the intent with all of these laws is that so far, any of them that have banned abortion, all of them have an exemption for the life of the mother. So, and ectopic pregnancies, that is not an abortion. Like when you're treating an ectopic pregnancy, that is a different diagnosis code altogether to begin with. But that is something that cannot survive outside the womb, and that will still be treated. And I think that there's some fear. I see a lot of fear on social media that maybe ectopic pregnancies won't be able to be treated appropriately. And I don't think that will be the case, and that's certainly not the intent by any means. And same thing with miscarriages as well. I've seen that a lot in the media. Well, women may not be able to get treatment for their miscarriage or could be criminalized for a miscarriage, and that's just not the case with
the intent, correct?
That's not the intent. And
And there's a lot, like I think in just our conversations off mic, there's a lot that's just up in the air because it seems like our legislators and elected officials, they kind of dropped a bomb and didn't do the fine print yet.
Yes.
There's a lot of fine print that they haven't gotten to yet, which I understand could lead to fear with these kind of things, but understanding that the intent is not there, and so there's really no, smoke alarm going off yet about those issues. Is
but I also think that's where a lot of frustration on my part comes in too, is okay, as a voter, once you get to 18 and people encourage you to vote and you're listening to all these people talk about one side or the other and why you should, vote for them, and they might be talking about their pro-life or their pro-choice. Well, now that they've given all this power back to the states, it feels like, maybe it's not true, it feels like that has just been like a talking head kind of a thing, but there isn't a plan. If I would have said, hey, 4 years ago or whenever, I'm going to vote for you, you're this, what's the actual plan if this power was given to you? Because now I feel like that's where we sit, where we're kind of scrambling because, oh, hey, this is a thing we've always said, but we don't actually have a plan. And now here we are.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's super frustrating.
And I think that's a valid point. Yeah. And, when you're looking at the legislation, and I think as an OBGYN, and I hear colleagues say this as well, is, when you criminalize it, so far when you look at the states that have actually criminalized abortion, it's for the provider of the abortion, that's a felony offense in every single state so far that it has, and again, grace umbrella because things could change.
Yeah.
And, but
tomorrow. Who knows?
Exactly. Yeah. But it's considered a felony offense and punishable by time in prison or a very large fine, losing your license.
Yeah.
So, and then the hospitals, of course, are worried about this criminalization of, are they going to be put at harm? So because of this vagueness, it's creating roadblocks that potentially could create roadblocks that are unnecessary, And so I think the importance of, I think you speak very well to that. We as a legislation, we need to know what the verbiage is going to be and who's at the table making these decisions. And because the intent, just like Joel said, the intent is there, but the action and the follow through are going to be really important. Yeah.
Any other misconceptions?
Yeah, I mean, I think just, throwing out a few other things that I see when I just kind of scroll through some of my social media. I mean, I think one thing that may be surprising or interesting to some is, most OBGYNs do not perform abortions. So, I see a lot of this, and again, this is a very heated, topic, but saying abortion is health care. When you actually look at statistically how many OBGYNs provide abortions, it's only about 14%. So there's gray in everything, and there's certain situations, that are unique, but, the majority of OBGYNs will never have to perform an abortion in their lifetime or feel like that is something that is a routine part of their care to adequately take care of women. So, whether you want to say abortion is healthcare or not, I think that's, that's a difficult general statement, but I think it's important to know that most OBs do not perform abortions. So,
because when you out in the public, when I'm talking to, my mom or random people on the street, like when they think abortion, they think, oh, this is someone who's been reckless and who now doesn't want to accept responsibility for, the consequence of, their action. But how many, I guess, I don't know.
How much of the story? How much is that the story?
How much is that actually the story of abortions being performed?
Yeah, that is a great question. So when you look at and again, when you look at abortion data, and this is where when me trying to dig in and do this topic justice, you also have to know that there's not a lot of great data. There's not requirements in every state for abortions to be reported. When the abortions are done with medical ways by medication, and there's no requirement by the CDC to report that at all. Some states choose to report that data, but some don't. So, anytime, and that's true in any spectrum of this, when you're looking at data, you just have to be careful because there's not a lot of great data. But the data that we have out there, about 10% of abortions are done for what we would think of as the hard reasons, like saving the life of the mother, like something significant that way, maybe a fatal birth defect, rape, incest falls into that category. 90% of them are considered to be more for socioeconomic reasons, but there's a lot of reasons that comes into play, and I can't speak for every woman that I've seen that's ever had an abortion, but most of them aren't there because they want to be there.
Right.
They don't feel like they have another choice.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so I think getting to the why, like what's behind the whys, are what really where we can do good work and dig in and hopefully make a difference in that aspect. But when you ask these women that are coming in for abortions, I think. So even though 90% of them are probably in that socioeconomic kind of reason, there is a tremendous lack of access and adequate birth control, contraception in our country. When you look back over years ago, there was a federally funded Title X, which is a federally funded program to give contraceptive access and family planning to all those states from federal funds. Planned Parenthood did a lot of that. And so, they also performed abortions, but they also did a lot of access. So when you talk about, if you ask your parents or like people in our generation, there was a Planned Parenthood in almost every county, and it was access to birth control. They could go in, and even these young girls, they didn't necessarily have to have their parents be aware. They could get a free visit. They could get very cheap birth control. Someone counseling on their options. Well, over the course of time, and for good or for bad, that Planned Parenthood pulled out of that Title X funding when some things changed in 2019, because that there was new regulations placed on Title X funding at that time where you couldn't also be a abortion. None of that money went to abortions, but you couldn't be an abortion provider in that same building. So Planned Parenthood was providing a lot of that access, and they pulled out. So when you look at the Title X funding and where that's going here, like in our state in Indiana, for example, there are still some federally funded clinics, but there are only 6 clinics north of Indianapolis.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're looking, like if you look at a map, our county and every single surrounding county, there is no federally funded access to contraception. So, I started calling around just because I'm learning with this. Joel asked me to do something. I want to make sure I do it right. So, I'm calling calling around there, the closest for like just for Kokomo, an example is almost an hour away, and that's a big gap.
Oh yeah,
You tie a
that's
couple
barrier.
things together there
Yeah.
that 90% socioeconomic reasons why women face this decision, and an hour away to reach something that's rather expensive that they do not have access to because of socioeconomics, and you're starting to create a very wide gap.
Yeah.
And you're starting, in my head, you're tying some things together of why we're seeing what we're seeing. And I guess I can only have my empathy grow because of that. You tie those things together, and if it's resources, think of someone who is working 50 hours a week
Yeah.
in a minimum wage job. And you're saying that they've got to take over a 2-hour trek there and back.
Yeah,
to
they
get
can't
some-
take the trolley. They're not walking.
Yeah, over an hour away. So that's really fascinating.
And it is, if you have insurance, that's different, right? I mean, I think through Obamacare, we know that, and that still stands, where if you have insurance, of whether it's private insurance or Medicaid, most birth control options are offered at a either zero cost or reduced cost, but it starts with insurance.
Yep.
So, and even Medicaid, sometimes Medicaid, depending on who you are, it should be accessible, but again, the logistics of who they call, do they have a car to get in to talk to someone in the office? They've got 5 kids, who's going to babysit the kids at home. So, I mean, there's reasons that come into play there.
Well, and
for
just
sure.
a quick Google search for me. Yes, this Title 10 doesn't affect people that are insured in America, but there's over 31 million people in America that are uninsured, even with Obamacare in place and with these protections. And so you're talking, 15 million women or so, right? I mean, there's just a huge gap in coverage.
Yeah. And then when you throw on top of that, in at least for the United States data that we have, approximately half of all pregnancies are unintended. And then, depending on which resources you look at, 30 to 60% of unintended pregnancies in an abortion. So, just fixing the unintended pregnancy part could make a big difference in the whole problem. So.
Yeah, one thing that was interesting to me was research from 1973 when Roe v. Wade went into effect to 2018. Under Republican presidents and under Democratic presidents, we saw a drop of actual abortions happen. It didn't matter if the guy was screaming pro-life, screaming pro-choice. It didn't matter because there was this huge just lack of, there wasn't as much need for it. And so we saw abortions decrease incredibly while Roe v. Wade was in law to 2018. 2019, Title 10 changes, Planned Parenthood moves out of that funding, and here we are.
Yeah, we're starting to see a little bump up. Now, again, what can we for sure attribute that to, we don't know. But yeah, it is interesting. 22% decline in abortions over the last, 15, 20, I think from the years 2000 to 2019. So that's exactly right. Yeah.
And one thing that I have seen a lot is Christians complaining about abortions that take place very late in the pregnancy. And in my mind, I see that, you've made it 8 months along. There has to be something that comes up that makes you choose to have an abortion that late. So what are your, what's your input on abortions that happen that late in the pregnancy? Like, do you typically see that with, people who have some type of complication that they've run into or financial issue, or is it just someone who, got along that far and just said, I'm decided I don't want this anymore?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can only speak to my experience in that. I just have never personally seen an abortion performed after the 22 week mark. So, the ones that I have seen performed at that time are someone comes into the office, they have an ultrasound, their baby's got some massive birth defects that, whether they may be no potential at life or very poor potential at life, those are the ones that I have seen happen, and that's all in that 22 week range. It's hard for me to understand and I don't know in other states if it really is happening further along than that, because babies are viable outside the womb. Now we at 22 weeks, if they're at least like 500 grams for the most part, we'll try to resuscitate those babies. So
in which it's 40 weeks is full.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm the guy in the room. I have to do the math.
Yeah, that's right. So 40 weeks is full term. And there are certainly times we've had to induce women if they're very sick with high blood pressure disease, or maybe they've got some bleeding issues going on. But that usually results in a preterm delivery, and sometimes an extremely preterm delivery. But that, we try to resuscitate those babies after almost always after 24 weeks, but even after 22 weeks we do that too. So I just don't see it. I haven't had experience of any kind of reason beyond that we actually really do see abortions happening later on. Now, could they be? Maybe. Nothing that I've seen.
Right.
Yeah, because I've heard of women who, later on in their pregnancy find out that, their baby no longer has brain activity or something like that. And some of them who have said like, hey, I was also forced to carry this baby to term. So that's where, the tension is a little bit, because, you're carrying this baby that is no longer viable. Then what?
Yeah. And to speak to that too, it makes me think of some examples. Like there are some times when these babies don't, like, say, they've got these significant birth defects or chromosomal abnormalities, and there's a really high chance that if you go all the way to 40 weeks, that their heart's not going to still be beating if you get that far. And there's some moms that just really want to hold their live baby and let that baby, pass in their arms and on their chest. And if you take them all the way to term, they may not get that opportunity. So again, that's some of that gray in there of, the decision sometimes made between a doctor and the patient of, what's the most humane thing to do in both for mommy and baby in that situation. It's just not straightforward or simple.
No. And I also just think of like, that situation is traumatic anyways, as a woman, as a mother, but I also think, if I have to carry this child that I know is not going to survive outside my womb, and have people asking me like, when's your baby due? What's it? Like, I just think of how much extra pain and suffering that you are kind of going through in that process. So there's no black and white. It's very gray.
And some of the state legislation so far that I've seen will have some exemptions for if the chance that the baby won't survive outside the womb is very slim or none. A lot of them don't. So, that was something in Indiana that we, that if the baby wasn't going to survive, that was something that you could induce early for. But from what I'm seeing so far, that's not out there for all of them. So it's something to think about with all these individual legislations.
So as a doctor and a follower of Jesus, what about the current ruling leaves you cause for concern?
My biggest concern, and I hope that it will get the bugs worked out over time, but there's certainly, like, when I see people just, yay, it's been overturned, like there's just a deep, compelling sense of responsibility and gravity to that, because, when you're looking at these individual legislations, I have some examples of just some other docs that I work with that are in some of these states that have already banned abortion, of having these roadblocks to care where moms are not getting good enough care out of fear. So, for instance, just to kind of keep this in a very vague example, but one example, a mom could be like 21, 22 weeks and her water breaks, say, and she shows every bit of signs of infection. And like this, I have an example of this with a doc that's in one of these abortion banned states. This mom also had a stitch in her cervix to kind of hold her. So she had a high-risk pregnancy where she had to have a stitch in her cervix to kind of keep the pregnancy. Well, her water broke. She shows signs of infection. The baby still has a heartbeat. But the next thing we typically have to do is take out that stitch. Otherwise, it will tear her cervix. It could cause problems. So she had to get approval from risk management in the hospital, the nurse managers, before she could even remove the stitch. She had to get a second doctor to agree. And then, so there was a lot of delay in care for a mom that was already going through something terrible that was going to end up in, no matter what, going to end up in a bad situation. But people are scared that, you throw a felony behind it. And, I think everyone is a little bit fearful that they don't want to do the wrong thing. So, there was some obstruction to care there. And, for this particular circumstance, the baby, once they take out the stitch, the baby just spontaneously started to deliver, still has a heartbeat, but then it kind of got stuck in the birth canal. So, at this point, delivery is inevitable, but it's not healthy for mom to have a baby stuck there in the birth canal. So, typically we have to give medicine like Pitocin to make contractions happen to deliver the baby. Well, she couldn't do that. She couldn't do that without approval. The nurses couldn't run the medicine. So in order to give Pitocin, the doctor had to come in every 20 minutes and push medicine.
Oh my goodness.
And it's just not good care. And again, is that the intent behind it? I don't think
so.
it is. But are we going to have some of these troubles in the meantime if we don't have like adequate descriptions of what we're talking about and, the vagueness and all these individual 50 different states we could. So I think, that's one of my biggest fears for sure.
Yeah. Well, and, something that I was thinking about the other day, I'm like, okay, so say you live in a state that has, banned abortion and it's a decision that you have made for yourself, but you live, close enough that, and and you're able to take time off work and you have the means and all these things. Like, can you drive to another state, have it happen? Like, are there any repercussions for you doing that or no? Will those states allow people to come in and do that? Like, I don't know how that's all going to work. And, at this point, it's like, I'm a person that I need the rules. Like, what are the rules?
Right.
What are the rules? I want to be able to read, clearly defined situations, but like, there's just so much gray. Like, we just keep talking about, like, could that mom just drive across the border and have it done?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And I don't think any of us know.
Right.
That's the fear.
Yeah.
We need some clarity there for sure.
Yeah.
Are there any other causes for concern, like, or something that just bumps up against, the Holy Spirit inside of you with the current reality that we see?
Yeah. I mean, I think, that one certainly is a big one. But I mean, really what bumps up against me a lot is this whole, like, access to birth control. I think, it's a big issue. And I feel like, we are not taking care of women. We can't place our beliefs on other people about premarital sex or contraception, but we've got to honor them by giving them like the access to that. And I think to not make sure that is well in place and we're providing for women, and then putting this ban out there, I just don't think it's fair. And I think that we need to really, that bristles up against me big time. Like, what can I do to help create contraceptive access?
Yeah.
For sure.
So
Speaking
that is
of
kind of,
teenagers, that worries me.
Yes, I do as well. So like,
Yeah.
in that vein, like, what can we do right now if we want to partner with God to bring peace to kind of all this chaos and the questions and just the uncertainty around everything?
Yeah. Well, and just before I kind of hit on that, I mean, I think the other thing that really has concern for me too, and then we can kind of talk about all those things, but, just the aftercare of what these girls do have, after, they carry this baby, they were concerned for socioeconomic reasons, whether it be job or childcare, and then they have this baby. There are still so many gaps out there on how to really help these women. And I can give you just an example. My stepdaughter, she's 28. She had a baby when she was in her early 20s, and she could get insurance. That was okay. Food stamps for her, and I don't know if this has changed, but you couldn't make more than $1,500 a month to get food stamps. So the minute that you make any kind of money beyond that, that's taken away. And this wasn't in regard to her, and I didn't know this until she told me, you can't have a prior drug charge to get food stamps. So if you've ever had a prior drug charge, then that's something you can't get. So access to adequate food. Her biggest issue, like housing and childcare, housing, at that time, there was a waiting list that was 2 to 3 years for any kind of decent housing. Yeah. Now, I don't know if she could have got into some of these like apartments in town, but to get actually like the vouchers for like rentals, and they actually just tabled it for a while due to lack of funding. So they put her on a 2 or 3 year waiting list. And then her biggest issue was childcare. So, there's assistance, there's voucher assistance and things for childcare, but it's only really for first shift. So as a young mom that maybe doesn't have any kind of degree or, profession that she can lean towards at that time, there's not many first shift jobs out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of waitressing jobs and evening jobs, but there's no childcare. So unless you have family to help you, which a lot of these people don't have support, they can't provide for their family if they don't have childcare. So, those are the things that bristle against me.
Well,
So.
and I can relate to that as well. Like, I was barely 21 when I had my first daughter, and like no one wanted to rent us an apartment because we were young. Like, I had a landlord actually call my parents and ask, and so it's there are so many barriers, and we were on WIC assistance and all sorts of stuff, and thankfully I worked a day job and my husband worked an evening job, and so we were able to kind of like, as soon as I got home, he left, and so somebody was always with her. But like, if that had not been the case, what would we have done during the day? So there's no way at that age that you can afford childcare and to work. It just kind of, it offsets everything you're making. So
It does.
it's very hard.
It is.
So what can we do?
What do we do? What do we do?
Outside of panic, outside of
Right.
panic, outside of,
Yeah.
some people probably are beating their chest thinking that this move in legislation is a great victory for God. There's both of those things, and I'm sure that both of those realities are listening with us. But I think the real pressing question is, what's next? And how do we be people that partner with God in this?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, number one is just listening and empathizing with people that are in this position. Just hearing these stories, I think it makes us better humans to really see the whites of people's eyes and hear what they have to say on any side of this spectrum. But I think just also being a voice, for me in healthcare, like even Joel just kind of asking me to come up and, talk about this stuff has just spurred such a desire. Like, I have a responsibility, I'm in this field. I have a responsibility to use my voice to help. And I think anyone that's in the healthcare field, albeit doctor, nurses, working in hospitals, maybe working in schools, that sort of thing. We just have to use our voice to kind of help from the medical side. I talk to legislation, and I've emailed Dr. Box, I've emailed Dr. Holcomb, put people like us at the table when you're making this legislation, and not just the extremes on both sides. I think anyone just imploring our local governments that if you have any kind of expertise in this area, to put yourself out there. I'm not one that likes to put myself out there, but it's
I had
important.
to pay her so much to be on the podcast. I am broke.
But I think that's, for one, if you have any kind of stake in the game at all, in that field, I think just you got to use your voice. And I think with the contraception, it didn't take me a whole lot of time to figure out where access was, at least for us. And even though it is 45 minutes, an hour drive, making do counselors know that in school? Do our young adults know this? Who we need to make sure that that's available. I feel bad to say, as an OBGYN, I didn't know. I live here, and I didn't even know where you could get Title X access. So, I think, helping in that realm as well, teachers, counselors, just using your voice to kind of help with that. Pregnancy resource centers. I kind of spontaneously, again, because Joel's got me on this mission, but I just walked into our pregnancy resource center in town, and they are so much good that they're doing there, and they could use so much help. Yeah. So, whether if it's just sitting at the front desk, they said they're constantly in need of volunteers. And there's a lot of things they provide in there that I didn't know. They provide at least our local one, and there's several that are part of this same structure, but they provide pregnancy tests, early ultrasounds. They provide education, mentoring. They do vouchers where you can pick out things from their store. There's a lot that they do to come alongside women. And I think it's probably an underutilized resource, and they need more help. So I think volunteering there, finding out what you can do, donating. They say that, diapers, wipes, they've got a list of things that they could use. They need people to come along and be mentors to these girls. So I think those pregnancy resource centers, you probably could find them in just about every area.
And just to add a question to that, the pregnancy resource center that we have here, we're not talking about a place that is going to shame women or push women down if they have made this decision, or try to, make sure that you could never do that, what does that look like?
Exactly. And that's really why I wanted to walk in there and talk to them myself, because I had that conception of, and I, that misconception in this circumstance, but, there are some places out there that they will put on their website, abortion care, abortion, counseling, and you get in there and it's a lot of shame and guilt about maintaining your pregnancy. And I never want anyone that feels like this, that they're at the end of the ropes and this is their only option, to feel like that they're shamed into anything. So you want to do your due diligence to find out, make sure that that's not what they do. And so, the Pregnancy Resource Center here in town is certainly not of the shaming variety. So yeah, I think that's a big one. And then, just other things like, I think, and maybe just from personal experience from watching my stepdaughter go through this, but childcare, that's something as a church that we could do, like just, having people adopt a grandkid, or, offering some type of second, third shift childcare. I think that we can come alongside these women. We can mentor, we can small group. I think we all have a responsibility, to step up right now, like to make a difference. So.
Absolutely. And, we talk about social media a lot, and just the how loud kind of that can be, because, you're behind a keyboard and it's easy to, have strong opinions when you're not, like you said, looking in the whites of somebody's eyes. And I heard a quote one time that said, we can be bright lights in the world without leaving our high beams on and annoying everybody. And so I think that, like, for me, that's where, like, social media and what we put out there and portray, especially as Christians and people who say that we are following Jesus, like, it's okay to have opinions, 100%, but it's how you are sharing that, if it's through a lens of love, and that's important, because people are watching you and they're watching us, and they want to see how we're reacting to these kinds of things. And if it's not through that lens of love and the voice, then not only are they going to be off put by you as a person, but by the church, and by, what it means to be loved by God. And so there's just a lot of responsibility, I feel like, that comes with being a Christian and having social media access and having opinions, all the things. So it's hard.
Yeah. So, man, thank you so much for your time, Andrea, and, and Abby and Allison too. I'm just sitting here and getting teary-eyed halfway through this, because it's such an important conversation. I'm so glad to have your voices in this. And I hope that this conversation is just a starter to the long road I think that people of faith have in front of us. We said we wanted this to be a conversation because there's a lot of people talking at each other, not hearing each other and listening. And so my prayer, some of my prayers through this big cultural moment that we're in, is that followers of Jesus would be known more for their curiosity, for asking questions and not making assumptions, but doing the work, and maybe leading to a place of empathy, of saying, hey, if I had experienced what you'd had experienced, I'd probably see things the way that you do. Man, what a beautiful thing to be known for, and what an incredible opportunity that we have. And, because Jesus is for all people, man, I pray that we widen the conversation from wherever we are, to be people that value everyone, the unborn, children, mothers, women, people of all across the socioeconomic spectrum, that we be people that stand in the gaps, and that we do our best for everyone, and we live in the gray and the mess in between those things. I also feel like instead of a moment of, chest beating and just strict celebration for people of faith, I feel an extreme weight and an opportunity, but it's a big opportunity that the church in the middle between 1973 to 2021, we didn't do a ton in, but a weight to get our hands dirty now and to ask some deeper questions of the why women face this impossible decision, and to look at the systems and the structures that I think we've tried to illuminate in this conversation, to be like, okay, how can the people of God stand in the gap and say, not on our watch?
Yeah.
It's not going to be a stance. It's not going to be just a flag or a sign in our yard. But how can we stand in the gap to say that this is not okay? And look at the systems and the things behind the things. Man, I'm like fearfully excited about that opportunity, because it is an incredible opportunity for a watching world to see people of faith not just be known for what they check on a theological test, but to be known for the way that we love each other, everyone. And I also just wanted to say before we close this conversation that, if you're listening to this and you're a woman and maybe you are in the moment where you're feeling the fear of this impossible decision, and you're, frightened about what God thinks about it, or if you're part of a faith community, what they think about it, and if you're going to be exiled if you make it, and what you're going to actually do to make ends meet if you don't make it. Man, I just want you to hear that you are so loved, and you're loved beyond the circumstances that you have in front of you. And there is a God who does not look at you as abortion or not abortion or pro-life or pro-choice in this, but he looks at you and he says that you're enough and you are loved beyond measure before you do anything. Man, I hope you hear that. And if you are a woman who has faced this decision, maybe in the 10% reality of those hard moments where you have to make a split decision and complications, or you're a woman who in your history or in your past you made that decision because it was the best decision that you knew how to make in front of you. I hope that you know that you are more than that decision, and that you have a God who loves you and is for you, and there are faith communities that would welcome you with open arms and say this does not define who you are. Your identity is way beyond this, and that you are welcome. I pray that you know that. And here at Bridgeway, we would love to support you and just put our arms around you and let you know that you have a place here and you've got a purpose here. So I just wanted you to hear that. Thanks so much for going on the journey with us.
Mm-hmm. And thank you again for joining us, Dr. Hoover.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for answering our
Happy to do it.
questions and doing research. You are probably the most prepared guest we've had.
She was by far the most prepared person in the room today, right?
Yeah, I can't say any of our other guests have gone to a pregnancy center to do their preparation beforehand. But thank you again for joining us. And if you have questions or topics you'd like us to talk about, you can email those to atypicaltalkpod@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook for all of those updates at Atypical Talk Pod. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We hope that these conversations today have helped you think wider, love deeper, and partner with God to bring the up there, down here in your everyday life. Thanks for listening.